My name is Ali, I'm a doctor and YouTuber.
I'm Taymor, I'm a data scientist and writer,
And you're listening to Not Overthinking.
the weekly podcast where we think about happiness, creativity, and the human condition.
Hello and welcome back to the podcast. Taymor, how are you doing today?
I'm doing all right, mate. How are you?
Yeah, not bad. Thanks for asking.
So what are we talking about this week, Ollie?
So this week I thought we'd talk about your recent rejection.
Oh man, which one?
So this is the one where you flew to California and applied to their startup thing. So do you want to give us a bit of background about that?
Yeah, sure. So I was in California for the past week or so. I flew out there. My co-founder and I, we applied for this sort of startup program where, you know, if they like you, they'll sort of invest in you and stuff. We applied for this program. They wanted to interview us. So my co-founder was already out there. I flew out there last week. You know, we'd spent some time preparing for this thing. We had the interview and it didn't go great and they didn't really like us. And we got a very nice rejection email later that day.
So how did that make you feel, getting that rejection email?
So I think it was a bit weird because I think after the interview, we both kind of knew that like it didn't feel like it went well. Like we didn't really have the kind of rapport with the interviewers that we would have liked. It didn't really seem like they were that convinced that the market for our idea is big enough for it to be like an interesting opportunity for them. So we kind of knew after the interview that like, okay, that didn't go great. They didn't really like it. And so I think we were kind of expecting it. So I think that sort of affected how we felt afterwards. So yeah, after the interview, we both we didn't feel, I wouldn't say we felt sad. We definitely felt a bit kind of bummed out. And
like a general feeling of melancholy.
Yeah. It was more like melancholy that the whole week had been building up to this moment. Didn't go great. We watched Godzilla right after the interview because we just wanted something to take our minds off of it while we waited for the decision. And then, we got the sort of rejection email and we were kind of expecting it. And I think melancholy probably sums it up about right.
Okay. And how does this relate to other, or rather, I suppose, have you had other rejection experiences in your life that you can kind of draw a parallel with?
Gosh.
Or honestly, not really.
No, there've definitely been plenty. Like I remember back when I was back in second year when I was on the internship hype and I wanted to do like these banking internships and stuff. I think I got one in the end, but I got rejected from like loads of those. And I think that actually felt pretty bad. I think
it felt bad getting banking internship spring week rejection.
Yeah, that kind of stuff. That felt quite bad back in second year.
Okay, why did it feel bad? And in what way did it feel bad?
This was a while ago. I think part of why that felt bad was because like loads of people around me were also applying to these things and plenty of people were also like getting into these things. And so I think part of why that felt bad was because of sort of comparing myself to other people. And it's like, oh man, I know this person who like got this internship that I didn't get or whatever. Yeah. I think part of it is also just like, I think that was one of the first sort of taste of real rejection that I had. I think before that, it was sort of plain sailing. I've sort of gotten quite fortunate in most things that I tried to do. And then, that was the first time I was like, oh, okay, cool. Like,
I suppose that's what it feels like.
Yeah.
Being rejected.
Screw me, I guess. Yeah. So that felt quite bad.
Back then I
think back then I relied on external things to kind of get my self-worth and my sort of identity. And so I think back then I kind of felt like, oh man, I can't get these internships. Like, what is the point? You know,
okay.
This kind of thing. Whereas I thought the interesting thing about the recent rejection we got for our company was that, we definitely had this feeling of melancholy. And we were kind of bummed out, but we weren't fundamentally like affected by it or like too saddened by it, because I think like going into this, we kind of had the approach of like, look, we know we're like on solid ground right now. We're both pretty convinced that this is like a solid thing. And some people are going to get it and some people aren't, and some people are going to get it right now and some people might get it, a year down the line or whatever. And so I think we sort of, our feelings about this endeavor that we're trying to do are much more internally generated. And so even if some people, who might be like prestigious or famous or whatever, even if these kinds of people don't necessarily get it, it doesn't really affect like what we're going to do. I thought it was quite interesting that when we told some people about this rejection, friends, family, whatever, most of them took it a lot more seriously than we did. A lot of them were like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Like, what are you going to do now? Are you going to carry on with the company? And that felt very strange because because I think internally our compasses were just sort of aligned on what we were going to do. And this was like, yeah, wasn't ideal, but it didn't fundamentally change the direction of anything. There wasn't really, it didn't affect us in that way. Whereas I think back in second year, for example, if we were like trying to start a company, if we pitched it to like a few people and they didn't really get it, then we would have immediately been like, oh man, all these like people who are like experienced in the field, they don't get it. And so there's probably nothing there, and screw us and let's just quit. And
Okay. So what you're saying is that back in the day, when your personal identity was tied up in these external measures of success, for example, number of spring week internships that you got in second year, then a rejection of that sort like really struck you to your core and made you feel a lot more sad than it currently does. Because right now, I'm sure your identity is tied up in a few different things, but when it comes to this company in particular, your internal drive to keep it going is so strong that if you get a few rejections along the way, you don't really care.
Yeah, I think there's two things going on. I like what you're saying about the sort of the sense of identity, and I think we should definitely come back to that. But also, I think I think previously the way I used to sort of model the world was almost kind of statistically. So I'd sort of going into anything, I'd sort of look at like the odds of like, let's say I'm trying to start a company. I'd look at the odds and say, oh man, like only 1 in 100 startups succeeds or whatever, and I'd like take that as a meaningful number or something. And then let's say I spoke to someone about my idea or something and they didn't like it, then in my head I would have thought, oh man, this person didn't like it and this person knows what they're talking about, therefore my chances of success are now like lower because of that, and that kind of thing.
Okay.
And so like getting rejected by prestigious companies or whatever, that used to have an effect on me because it was like, oh man, prestigious person or company thinks I'm worthless, therefore I am more likely to be worthless. Whereas I think one of the biggest shifts I've made in my own sort of thinking in the past year or two is that I've stopped thinking sort of statistically in terms of these kinds of things, and I've started thinking more analytically in terms of building up my own model of the world, my own worldview, and obviously like taking data into account. So when, for example, someone says, I'm not convinced by your idea because of these reasons, definitely like understand what they're saying, definitely see what those reasons are. And where previously I would have just looked at the surface and seen, okay, knowledgeable or prestigious person thinks like my idea is bad, therefore it's bad. Now I sort of think more like, okay, why did they think it was bad? What do I think about that reason? Is that, do we think that's like a valid reason? Does that like contradict anything we already know? Or, how does that change how we should see the world? And so with this particular rejection, they gave us some feedback. The feedback made total sense. And yeah, it's something we're sort of aware of. It's something we're hoping we'll address further down the line. We're still pretty early on. And so I think fundamentally, we weren't put off by the fact that prestigious people turned us down because we sort of understood why, and it was sort of still pretty aligned with our plans.
Okay, so you're kind of saying that it's now more about why they did the rejecting rather than who did the rejecting.
Yeah, whereas previously I would have focused a lot more on the who and sort of my opinions on things would be like a weighted average of opinions other people had on these things, weighted according to like how like prestigious this person was.
Okay.
Whereas now it's more like, okay, lots of people are going to say lots of things. I have to like build up my own worldview and have conviction in that.
Okay, so this kind of reminds me of a parallel in the dating world, a world that I am clearly intimately familiar with. That was a joke, by the way, for anyone listening. And the parallel is that if you were to Google how to deal with rejection, hypothetically speaking, you'd probably come across a fair few articles and kind of advice videos and things like that saying that, when it comes to asking someone now if they reject you, it's often not really about you. It's often more about the circumstances. Maybe they're not open to a relationship right now. Maybe, they're in a relationship. Maybe they just weren't interested for various reasons. And yeah, sure, fine. Maybe it was because they didn't particularly like you, but it kind of goes more from this advice tries to make us think of it less in terms of this person rejected me and more in terms of why might this person have rejected me, and is there anything I can do about that, and is there anything I want to do about that? So for example, if they rejected me for purely because they live in Malaysia and I live in the UK and they have no plans to move, then yeah, fair enough. There's not really much I can do about that. If they rejected me because they're not physically attracted to me, me, then okay, perhaps I can maybe do something about that, but perhaps not. Perhaps I don't even want to. And I'm more nuanced about why rather than just about the fact that you are rejected. So I think it's very easy to fixate on, oh my God, I got rejected, and think less about the reasons for that.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's the reasons that are important. And in like so many things, the reasons are even like out of your control. I'd say probably in like most things, the reasons are not like you or anything. And in this case for us, I think like the reasons, I think they're mostly like within our control. They sort of make sense. But in other realms, like dating or whatever, a lot of the time it's not worth trying to dig into the reasons behind these things. So that's me. What about you? What was the last rejection you had?
The last rejection I had.
Let's start with non-romantic, and then then we'll get onto the
onto the juicy stuff.
Yeah, this might be our longest podcast ever.
Very good. So the last non-romantic rejection I had. Damn, I've really got to think far back. Okay, so the one that comes to mind is that a few years ago I applied to go to Harvard for this 1 year year abroad program that was offered to maybe a handful of students at my college, and it was quite a prestigious thing, and you had to apply for it, and you had to write this long ass application letter about why you would benefit from this sort of experience. The angle I went down was that, hey, I'm a medical student, I enjoy coding on the side, I make these websites and stuff, I've got this business running, and I'd really like to expand my horizons by maybe tapping into the Harvard MIT kind of technological syndicate over there, probably not using those words. And I thought that I maybe might have a pretty reasonable chance of getting this. And then I got a physical, a thing through the post from the dean of the college, probably just one of those standard,
we regret to inform you.
Exactly, yeah. Thank you so much for applying. I'm sorry to have to say that on this occasion you were unsuccessful.
Oh, that's classic.
Yeah,
this occasion,
it's classic. There's no way there's any other occasion because it was a 1 year only thing. So that was the one that immediately comes to mind in terms of being rejected from something that I really wanted to do.
So it sounds like you're sort of semi-expecting to get that. And I know it'll sound really bad if you say, yeah, I was expected to get that. But it sounds like you were semi-expecting to get that.
I wouldn't say I was semi-expecting to get that. I thought I had a reasonable chance of getting that, and I thought the angle that I went with, i.e. the medical plus tech angle, would have worked, was an interesting angle. Clearly it wasn't, and like if I didn't think I had an interesting angle, I may not have even applied. But yeah, no, so that was a rejection. But I mean, at the time, I don't remember it even affecting me that much. And I think the reason why that was is because I think I've internalized this kind of stoicism concept of, like, even then had internalized this idea that, okay, it is what it is, let's move on with our lives. And there's very little point in dwelling on things like rejection. You learn what you can from them, and then you move on, because it doesn't do anyone any good to dwell on it.
Yeah, sure. Dwelling on it is one thing, but like, how did you feel when you got that? Was it kind of like melancholy? Was it like more negative than that?
I think it was semi-melancholy for maybe about 30 seconds. I was like, oh damn, that's a shame. But again, because I hadn't heard back from them for so long, I just kind of I'd kind of forgotten I'd even applied to the thing. Like it wasn't playing any part in my kind of day-to-day happiness, day-to-day model of the world. And so when I got rejected from it, I was like, oh, okay, cool, fair enough. It was kind of disappointing a little bit, but then it's a case of, okay, great, let's move on.
Yeah, sure. Okay, what about romantic rejections?
Oh man, got plenty of those. So the one that comes most to mind was a few years ago. I had a crush on a friend of mine, and over the course of a few months, I was like, okay, maybe there's a vague possibility that this could go somewhere. We were getting on very well, and always quite good friends. So then at one point, I decided that, okay, I'm just gonna write her a letter and say that, like, I like you.
You wrote her a letter?
Yeah, it was a physical letter.
Did she live halfway across the world, and this was the 1800s?
Very good. No, but I think a letter is a reasonable form of communication for this sort of thing. And actually, in hindsight, I'd probably do a similar thing. Perhaps not in physical letter, perhaps just over message. But I'm a big fan of not doing these things in person.
Why?
Right, because basically, especially if you're like good friends with someone, and especially if they're the sort of person who's just like really nice, and like if they were to reject you, they would feel super, super, super bad about it.
Yeah.
I don't want to put any undue pressure on them to because like either they like me or they don't, and so the medium by which I convey my interest to them is going to be completely irrelevant. If they actually like me and I send them a text saying I like you, they're gonna be like, oh my god, I like you back, right?
Yeah.
If they don't and I send them a text saying I like you, they've got lots of time and space to figure out how they're going to respond to this in a nice way to not hurt my feelings, and to maybe discuss it with their like female friends, like, oh my God, he just told me he likes me, I don't know what to do, and then try and get their perspective and all this stuff, essentially giving them some time to respond. And I think that is the right thing to do in those circumstances, where if I just go up to them in person and be like, look, Jane, would you like to go out with me sometime? Or however you might phrase that in person. I can't imagine phrasing that in person. Then it puts her on the spot, and it means that she has to kind of manage her kind of emotions, her facial expressions, and try and kind of let me down nicely if she doesn't like me, in a way that doesn't impact our friendship. And there's all these different pressures that are applied to it when you're doing it in person, which is why I'm a huge advocate for doing this sort of stuff in a medium that gives them enough time to respond to it.
That's really interesting. I think that makes perfect sense, man. I think that's interesting because it's like, it definitely goes against the accepted wisdom in these things, which is that, you know, you should do these things in person, and all this kind of like really old school stuff about like, you know, you got to be like a real man, and, you know, all this kind of stuff, and like do it in person because that's like that's what real men do. All this kind of deeply problematic, very old school thinking. Whereas like what you're saying definitely makes sense. So I'd be curious if there's anyone who is very much in the other camp of like, no, this should absolutely be done in person. I'd be curious to hear what they think, but it sounds like what you're saying makes sense.
I mean, so like I've polled a lot of people I know about this sort of thing. I'm especially curious to ask girls that, you know, if a friend were to say that they liked you, but you did feel the same way about them, would you rather they do it in person or would you rather they do it over text? And 100% of them say I'd much rather they do it over text because it gives me time to respond.
Oh, nice.
I think the in person is probably more optimal for circumstances in which the very fact that you're asking them, you know, leads them to say yes. So for example, if you don't know someone very well at all, asking them on a date in person is probably like, oh yeah, that's a very confident behavior. Yeah, sure, why not?
Yeah, that makes more sense. Yeah.
Whereas if it's, you know, a good friendship that you're trying not to, you know, crash and burn via this confession.
Yeah.
it's all about the medium that gives them time.
All right, so anyway, back to the story.
Back to the story.
Did it crash and burn?
Yeah.
Oh.
So that completely crashed and burned. But like, she was really nice about it.
The friendship?
Well, no, the confession crashed and burned.
Oh, okay, yeah.
The friendship stayed great.
So how did she respond? How did?
She took ages to respond, and then she sent me a text being like, "Hey, you know, we should talk about this in person. But I just wanted to let you know, thank you for telling me, blah blah blah. It's the nicest thing anyone said to me, blah blah blah. I'm really sorry. I don't feel the same way. Yeah, I'll talk to you about this definitely properly. But yeah, I just wanted to let you know.
Sounds very nice.
Yeah, it was just like super nice. And then we just didn't really mention it at all for the next like 2 years.
So you didn't talk about it in person?
No, we didn't talk about it in person.
That's really funny.
Because I think in those circumstances, like from all the various opinion polls I've conducted on this particular issue, it seems like
you Gov.
it seems like a big fear of people, like regardless of whether you're the boy or the girl or the boy or the girl, whatever, in this situation, regardless of which party you are, there's always that fear of, I don't want to make things awkward. And I think when you're the party who has been rejected, the onus is on you to not make it awkward, because the other person is going to want to keep things as normal as they have been. And then if you're weird about it, then it becomes weird. Whereas if you are normal about it and genuinely are okay with it, then things are fine.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So how did you feel when you got this text?
It was a major feeling of relief.
Relief?
Yeah, it was full on relief. There was almost no disappointment there, because I kind of knew what the answer would be. Like, because when you're gonna tell someone that you like them, that's probably not the first idea they've had in that mind. Like, I'd told a couple of other people that I liked this person, and I was 98% sure that that was going to get back to her, and that she hadn't addressed this.
Oh.
I was also kind of vaguely flirting in our interactions, and they were semi-reciprocated, but not in like a sort of, if it was someone who were genuinely interested in me in me sort of way. So I'd already had a maybe like 95% percent sure that she didn't like me back, but I still had to do it anyway, because this is the sort of advice that people come to me for when asking about relationships, and my advice is always, just tell them, what do you have to lose? I was like, what do I have to lose? Nothing. I might as well, close this chapter of my life and move on. Whereas prior to that point, it was always a little bit of a, like an imperfect cadence, where it's like, it's not quite resolved yet.
Bloody hell, mate.
Cheeky theory of music there. Yeah.
Okay, that's cool. So that was probably the biggest sort of romantic rejection you had.
No, it's well, can count all the way back. So I think the biggest one for me was when I was in first year, and I already fell head over heels in love in inverted commas with this girl who I'd met that year, and she was like amazing in every way, and I really liked her, and I thought we'd get on, and we were really good friends. And then I was sort of vaguely hinting throughout the whole of first term that I liked her, and she wasn't really giving anything back. And then at one point I was like, okay, you know what? Maybe I'm not making it obvious enough. And then
Wait, you sent her a letter?
No. This was before I had this.
Pre-enlightenment.
Exactly, 100%.
The Dark Ages.
Yeah. This was when I was still all about doing things in person. So I just kind of, I think the way I did it was I made some kind of joke about us getting married or something. It sounds super cringe right now. And she was like, "Oh, Ali, that's so cute, but I really think of you as a brother."
Like, for real?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
And then apparently everyone else found out about this. And then, a couple of years later, I was chatting to some friends, and they were like, "Yeah, she totally brother zoned you."
Oh, mate.
So that was a huge rejection. I took it quite personally.
Really?
Yeah.
So how did you feel? More than melancholy?
Yeah, far more than melancholy, because like at the time, like my whole happiness was dependent on this person.
Wow.
And it was like it's a feeling I've never experienced since or before then. Like there was the only occasion in my life where I was like so, I don't know, hormonal about someone that, like, if I would see her and sort of walking to lectures or something and have a brief chat, I'd have a spring in my step for the rest of the day.
Wow. Yeah.
Or like, if I felt that she was a kind of didn't make eye contact when we were kind of sitting a few rows apart from in a lecture theatre, I'd start overanalyzing. Oh my god, why doesn't she like me? Have I done anything wrong? Has she found out? Whatever.
Yeah.
We've all been there. So that was probably the biggest personal rejection thing.
How long did you feel sad about that for? Did you dwell on this, etc.?
I didn't dwell on it that much. I think I felt bad about it for like a week.
A week?
Yeah, probably felt bad about it for a week. But like, we were still good friends, and I was like, okay, cool, fair enough.
Brother and sister.
brother and sister, exactly. And I kind of, I think the way I rationalized it was like, okay, maybe she'll change her mind.
Really?
So I was like, you know what, I'm quite content to play the long game. We were quite good friends anyway, so I was like, okay, even if this doesn't actually go anywhere, I still want this friendship to stay a thing.
Right.
So I was trying actively hard to not make it weird.
What was your takeaway from this? Did you like start thinking about, okay, why might she have rejected me? How can I like improve in those ways so that I'll win her love or whatever? Like,
yeah, partly actually. This sort of inward reflection happened kind of a few weeks to months later, rather than in the moment, because in the moment you're in the middle of term, you've got stuff to be dealing with.
Yeah,
that wasn't really the time for me to start having this existentialist
sort
of self-analytical thing. But then, yeah, over the next few weeks to months, I really started thinking about whether I was the sort of person that a girl like her would be interested in.
Interesting.
So one important takeaway from that, I think, again, through browsing the internet and stuff, was the general advice that you should definitely take care of your body. You should definitely be working out, because even though the traditional teaching on this is that looks aren't everything, obviously it helps to be physically attractive.
Yeah.
And you can't do much about your face, but you can do things about, for example, the way you dress and having some semblance of muscles rather than being tubby or really, really skinny. Stuff like that. Traditional notions of masculine attractiveness. And right. I was like, so I kind of took that away from that.
So then you started hitting the gym regularly, and now you're ripped.
Well, that was kind of the theory. I think I started hitting the gym a few times a week for about 3 or 4 weeks.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And now I don't really go to the gym anymore. But I'm going to start once I do that thing that we referenced in one of the previous episodes, where I give my housemate 500 quid.
Oh yeah, of course, which you haven't done yet. Which you said you would do.
Yeah, I'm planning to.
Maybe we need to make another money bet where you give me money if you don't end up giving Molly money.
Yeah, like actually, this absolutely has to happen. Like we were hanging out with some friends earlier today, and one of them is like super hench now, and he was like, he was suggesting some ways that I might actually enjoy going to the gym now. Because I think the key is to work it into your daily routine rather than to have it as like I have to go to the gym. So it's very easy to go to the gym after work. So I'm just going to start doing that. I will commit to it. I promise. 3 times a week.
Classic.
But yeah, like apart from the physical thing, over the next sort of weeks to months after that rejection, I was also looking into this stuff. And I'd also read a few, the classic books that guys like to read about, how to get girls and stuff. and the classic theory about this was that, it's all about having a good sense of humor, and girls are attracted to charisma and confidence. And at the time, I wasn't that charismatic or confident, so I think
at the time,
well, come on, I think I'm pretty confident these days when it comes to non-romantic prospects. But yeah, so then I think that was when I discovered the book Charisma on Command. That was the year, and started like reading more about like what charisma means and what it means to be funny and what it means to be confident and stuff like that. And I actually think that stuff really helped me over the long term.
Okay. So you took some like positive, you were sad for like a week, and at some point you had like a think about this, and you took some positive things away about how to improve yourself. Was that the right thing to do? Like, it definitely seems like a net positive to try and improve yourself and pick yourself back up after a rejection like that. But it seems like the wrong mental model of things, where it's like, okay, girl rejected me for XYZ reasons. I'm now going to improve myself in XYZ ways, and then she'll love me,
Then I'm 2x and y plus 1 and z plus 4.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that seems like the wrong mental model, even though it's probably net positive to like try and improve yourself after that.
Yeah, I agree. It's probably suboptimal. I think the optimum mental model for this is to think of dating not as a way to convince someone that to think of dating not as a way to convince them to like you, but more as a way of just establishing whether your personalities and vibes click enough that you'll get on, essentially.
Yeah.
So being fully okay with who you are, but and recognizing that you're trying to find someone who also likes that. But then there is the other side, as you said, of the fact that it is a net positive to be in shape. It is a net positive to be funny or more charismatic. Like, no one is going to say that, oh, actually, I prefer a guy who's less funny, or I prefer a guy who's more out of shape. Like, it's a universal good.
Yeah.
Unless anyone has any different experiences of that, please do let us know. I suppose there is someone out there for everyone.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. I think one of my biggest regrets is that I didn't put myself out there romantically at university.
Oh, interesting. All right. What do you mean by that?
Like, I've had plenty of crushes on plenty of girls, and like, yeah, I have like,
all right.
Yeah, I have like crushes all the time, but I honestly, during most of university, the thought to do anything about it didn't even cross my mind. Like, it's thinking back, it's ridiculous that I sort of thought that way. But sort of, if I sort of had a crush on someone, I'd just kind of have a crush on them and not even think about doing anything about it. Not even think about like asking them out on a date or whatever,
It's more like admiring them from afar.
Admiring them from afar, or like we might sort of be sort of friends or acquaintances or something.
Okay.
But yeah,
so kind of like the crush you had on Emma Watson back in the day. It just wouldn't occur to you to actually do anything about it, short of stalking a Wikipedia article.
Actually, I probably did more about my crush on Emma Watson than I remember. Like it was like the summer after. All right, let me set the scene. Summer after year 8.
Year 8. Wow, that's when you were 13.
Yes,
She's also probably like 14. Okay.
I had jack all to do all summer. What I did was I watched all of Friends. I binged on 10 seasons or something of Friends.
I hope you realize Emma Watson's not in Friends.
Yes, yeah, I realized that.
Okay, cool.
And then I felt really empty inside because I just finished a TV show.
Yeah.
And I also felt like, oh man, they have like a really cool group of friends. I wonder if I'll ever have that, that kind of thing. Like, my life is bad compared to them.
Yeah, okay.
And so I felt really empty. And then I somehow got back into Harry Potter or something and sort of got obsessed with Emma Watson, sort of stalked Wikipedia and stuff like that. And then I started thinking of ways that like we might bump into each other. So I think she was living in Oxford at the time or something. And I sort of imagined that, I'd go to Oxford, I'd sort of be punting with my friends or something. And then, maybe we'd run into each other. All this kind of stuff.
Wow.
So, yeah, I probably...
So you imagined a future with Emma Watson, and yet you didn't imagine a future with, for example, the girl you had a crush on who was in your college in the same year as you.
That's exactly right. But yeah, look, I just didn't do anything about crushes at university. I'm not sure why that is. Maybe it's like the cultural background, like, from like a Pakistani sort of Muslim family, it's not really the norm. Like, nowhere in the family lore that you hear about all through your life is there like, oh yeah, and I had a crush on that girl and then I asked her out and like, yeah, whatever. That's not part of the family lore. That's not part of like the norm, I think. And so I think for that reason, it didn't really occur to me. But I think also a big part of it was that I was just like deeply, deeply terrified about getting rejected by someone romantically.
Interesting.
I think...
Has that changed?
I think that has changed. I think like since graduating, I've kind of changed tack.
Okay. When you've realized that actually, oh crap, I don't have this pool of, intelligent, attractive girls anymore to potentially go for, or?
I don't know. It's not so much that. I think it's more just that, it's kind of what you were saying about like like, what do I have to lose? I mean, there seems to be an awful lot to gain and not much to lose apart from feeling a bit sad that someone rejected you, you know? And I think now my mental model for these things is not really like, oh, this person who I am attracted to rejected me, therefore I'm worthless or whatever. It's more that, okay, they rejected me. I'll definitely feel sad about it. I'll definitely probably feel more than melancholy about it for, you know, maybe a day or something. But I don't, I think it comes back to like having my own like internal compass for things and not relying on like external things to sort of, base my self-worth on or whatever.
Okay, so this kind of comes back to our thing that we mentioned right at the start about diversifying your identity. And like, this is the classic advice I give to people who are like, how do I deal with getting bad results in my exams? And the only reason people feel bad about getting bad results in exams is if their identity is to some extent tied to that external metric of success, i.e. the results they get in their exam. Like, I remember when I was in year like 7 to 9, my position in the school entry was rank 1. And so every year it became like a massive, huge deal for me that my whole identity is wrapped around this thing of being top of the year group. And so, you know, towards the exam, I would work really, really, really hard and just tie up my whole thing in this. And had I not come top of the year group in year 7, 8, or 9, I would have completely devastated. And therefore, wow. That is the sort of feeling I imagine people get when, for example, you miss an offer because you didn't get the grades, or you were aiming for, I don't know, all A stars, but you missed out, or whatever. If your identity is that deeply tied within that, you know, that academic thing. And actually, I found with a lot of my medic friends, when we were in first year, especially the ones who were, you know, for the most part, they were all very, very like high achievers at school. And so it was a really big deal for everyone to do well in the first year exams, to the point that people ended up kind of having mental breakdowns, having mental health issues and stuff, because they were chasing that thing of getting a first, because that was like the metric that their whole identity was based around, because they didn't really have anything other than I am intelligent and therefore I need to get good grades, end quote. And I think over time we've all developed more sources of our own identity. So I think the ideal is to have it purely internally generated. Like, I don't need any external measures to have my identity sorted, to be happy. I think that's probably an ideal that we all can strive for, but very few of us actually attain. I think a more practical strategy is to diversify your identity. This is something that Mark Manson talks about in a very good article that we'll link in the show notes below. And having different things that you're like, yeah, you know what, like, who cares if I didn't get that first class in the exams? At least I still, you know, have a decent group of friends and enjoy my life, and at least I'm still good at the guitar or whatever. And that's a semi-problematic way of looking at it, but I think it's better than purely focusing on one individual external metric.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. I think early on, like in school and stuff, it's rare. Well, school is just like a massive part of your life. And so I think a lot of people who are quite academic, your sort of academic achievement tends to be a huge part of your identity, and that's why it sort of feels bad to do poorly academically if that's like a really big deal for you. I think the ideal, I think, is definitely not to rely on external things for your identity. But yeah, as you say, I think it's definitely better to have more and different things, different external things that you can rely on, so that if any one of them isn't going well at any particular point in time, you don't feel too bad about it.
Yeah.
And I think there was a real turning point for me in third year. I can't remember why this came about, but I think I think before this point, my identity was quite heavily tied up in external things. I don't know how I can't remember exactly what those things were or how diversified it was, but it was sort of tied up in various external things. And I kind of realized that to some extent, I'd been living my whole life sort of on the assumption that people will only care about me if I have like external measures of some success or something. And I mean people in a loose sense. Like, I don't think, I never felt like, you know, my family will only love me if I do well or anything. It wasn't like that. It was more people a bit more widely than like family. And then I had a turning point in third year when I can't remember why or how, but I think I was reading some article online about like
how to love yourself.
Not how to love yourself. I think that was a different day. But I think I read something about how all it really matters in life to have is like a few people, or just like one person who sort of loves you unconditionally, like a friend who loves you unconditionally. And I kind of realized that actually I do have a friend like that. This was in third year at university. And that kind of sort of, I kind of thought actually, even if like I had literally nothing else in life, this friend would still sort of love me for who I am, etc., etc.
Oh, that's nice.
And that kind of was a real good turning point for me. And since then, I've kind of changed my outlook on this quite a bit.
Okay. Oh well, that's very heartwarming story.
Thank you.
So should we wrap up? So we've sort of talked a bit about rejection, and I suppose I always like to end with a few kind of practical life hacks on how to live a better life. #. And I suppose what we've said is that partly dealing with rejection is a case of taking away lessons from it and then moving on and not dwelling on it. We've said partly it's about recognizing why you were rejected and then thinking analytically about what, if anything, you can do about those or that you're inclined to do about those. And thirdly, a big part of the sting of rejection is when our identity is tied up in the thing that we are being rejected from. So I suppose academics is the most clear example for both of us and for a lot of listeners to this podcast. And the solution there is to diversify your identity into lots of different things that give you sources of self-esteem, but ultimately realize that actually if your self-esteem is internally generated, that is obviously, the ideal to strive for.
Yeah, I think looking back on what we've been talking about, I think I did a lot of rambling at the start of this podcast to arrive at an articulation of an idea that I've been trying to sort of think about and articulate for a while, which is that previously my sort of worldview was the weighted sum of other people's worldviews. And I've sort of, a big shift in my life for the past like year or two has been moving towards, away from this like weighted sum of other people's worldviews towards a sort of construction of my own worldview. And that's, I think that's been like a huge shift in my thinking. And
so should we end with a insight or funny thing of the week? Okay, so I've got an insight of the week. I came across this in a podcast, and when I heard it, I was like, oh my god! Like I was driving in the car, and I genuinely kind of gasped at how legit this phrase was.
All right.
And this is a quote by Rudyard Kipling, apparently, and this sort of ties in with what we were discussing in a previous episode about consistency and getting stuff done. One of my favorite topics. And this quote went as follows. It said that if you want something and don't get it, then there are only two reasons for that. Either you didn't want it enough or you tried to negotiate on the price. And when I heard that, I was like, oh my God, that's so legit.
One second.
Have a think. Either you didn't want it enough or you wanted to negotiate on the price.
Oh, or like you weren't willing to pay the right price.
And when I heard that, I was like, I immediately fit that quote to almost every struggle I've ever had in my life as being either a case of I don't want it enough or a case of not being willing to negotiate on price. So for example, like case in point, things like going to the gym. I've often kind of wondered whether, why am I not hench right now? and the answer is I to an extent don't really want it enough. Like I don't really have a defined goal in mind. And if I did, I'm absolutely not willing to pay the price required to get there, which sort of means I don't really want it enough. So having that particular mental model means that now whenever I think I want something but don't get it, I actually think, no. Right, what's the problem here? Do I actually not want this enough, or am I not willing to pay the price? And then in either way, that gives me some good information about myself, and it means I can target one of those two avenues if I actually do want to work towards this thing. So I thought that was an interesting insight that I came across this week. All right, well, thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. Please feel free to get in touch with us. hi@notoverthinking.com. If you're on an Apple device of any description, please do leave us a review in the iTunes store. It really helps. Preferably a decent review. We've got lots of nice ones, but we have a few kind of mean ones, which are always entertaining to read as well. But yeah, thanks very much for listening.
Yeah, just on the topic of reviews, thanks a lot to everyone who's left really nice reviews. It genuinely is like really heartwarming to read these things. It means a lot. So thanks to everyone who did that.
Yeah. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.